Mama Chinyere saw the flowers before she saw the woman. White lilies, fresh, with dewdrops still clinging to the petals. Someone had left them that morning. The problem was that no one visited that grave. No one but her. For 3 years, she had been coming every 15th of the month, cleaning her son Emeka's headstone with a damp cloth, pulling out the dry weeds that the scrubland pushed between the cracks, always alone, always in silence. But today, kneeling before the concrete cross, was a young woman dressed in clothes that did not belong to this village. Expensive clothes, city clothes, and clinging to her leg, a boy of about 3 years old stared at the headstone with eyes that Chinyere knew better than her own. They were Emeka's eyes. The woman hadn't seen her arrive. She was crying silently, her hand resting on the earth, as if she wanted to touch something that was no longer there. What Mama Chinyere discovered in that burial ground knocked the ground from under her feet in one swift blow. Because that child not only resembled her dead son, that child did something only Emeka did, a gesture no one could have taught him. If you know what it feels like to look at someone and see the person who has passed on, please leave your like now. Subscribe and activate the notification bell. Tell us from which state you are watching us. But to understand what happened that morning, we must go back 3 years. 3 years, 1,095 days. That was what separated Mama Chinyere from the last time she heard her son Emeka's voice. Not his voice on the phone, that stopped months before the accident. The last real voice, of flesh and blood, was when Emeka said goodbye at the ranch door with a backpack on his shoulder and a red bandana tied around his neck. "I'm going to the city, Mama, but I'll be back." He didn't return. Mama Chinyere lived alone in a small compound on the outskirts of a village that didn't even appear on road maps. Deep in the Nigerian scrubland, dry earth, an enormous sky, heavy silence. The compound was 4 mud brick walls, a corrugated iron roof that sounded like a drum when it rained, a wood-burning kitchen, and a compound yard where chickens pecked among the cassava plants. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it had been Emeka's. Every 15th of the month, Mama Chinyere would wake up earlier than usual. She would put on her clean dress, the dark blue one she only wore for going to the market. She would comb her gray hair into a tight braid, and before leaving, she always did the same thing. She would open the drawer of the old chest of drawers that had belonged to her mother. She would take out a faded red bandana, worn by the sun and sweat. She would unfold it carefully. She would run her fingers over the fabric, as if she could feel the warmth of the one who used it, and she would put it in the pocket of her wrapper. She didn't wear it. She kept it close. On that 15th day of March, the path to the burial ground was drier than ever. It hadn't rained in weeks. The hot desert wind raised whirlwinds of dust that got between her teeth. Mama Chinyere walked the 2 kilometers from the compound without complaining, carrying a bucket of water, a clean cloth, and a bunch of wildflowers she had picked from the edge of the dried-up stream. The village burial ground was not like those in the cities. There were no high walls or iron gates. It was a rectangle of earth fenced with barbed wire, where wooden and concrete crosses rose among the iroko trees and dusty shrubs. The oldest graves no longer had names. The sun and wind had erased the letters, as they erase everything in the scrubland. Emeka's grave was at the back, near the largest iroko tree, a gray concrete cross with his name painted by hand by Baba Dele, the neighbor. Emeka Eze, son of Chinyere, may God keep him in his glory. Mama Chinyere saw the white lilies from afar and stopped. The wind hit her face, and she had to squint. But it wasn't the wind that paralyzed her. It was those flowers, large white lilies, with long stems and perfect cuts. Lilies that didn't grow in any garden in that village. Lilies that cost money. Lilies that someone had brought from afar. And then she saw the woman. She was kneeling in front of the grave, her back to Mama Chinyere. She wore a cream-colored dress that contrasted with the brown earth like a cloud fallen from the sky. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders. Beside her, a leather handbag rested on a stone, and clinging to her right leg, half hidden, a small child looked at the concrete cross. Mama Chinyere felt her stomach clench. In 3 years, no one she knew had visited that grave. Not relatives, because there were none left. Not friends, because those Emeka had in the village went to the city just like him. Not women, because Emeka never spoke to her about any. Who was this woman? And why was she crying at her son's grave as if it belonged to her? Mama Chinyere advanced slowly, Her worn sandals made no sound on the loose earth. With each step, the details sharpened. The woman was not just crying, she was talking, whispering something Mama Chinyere couldn't quite hear. Her right hand was extended over the earth, fingers spread as if she wanted to reach something underneath. The child was small, 3 years old, maybe less. He had light brown skin, dark hair cut unevenly, and wore clean new clothes, branded shoes, denim trousers without a single stain. In this village, 3-year-old children had scraped knees and shoes full of dirt before 8 a.m. This child was not from here. Mama Chinyere stopped 5 steps away. She cleared her throat. The woman jumped as if she had been shot. She turned around abruptly, her eyes red and swollen, and Mama Chinyere saw her face for the first time. She was young, beautiful, but with a sadness that aged her 10 years. "Who are you?" Mama Chinyere asked. Her voice came out harsher than she intended, but her heart was pounding, and when the heart pounds hard, the voice hardens on its own. The woman stood up quickly, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. She adjusted her dress, searching for an answer that didn't come. I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't know anyone else would be here. I come every month," Mama Chinyere said, not moving. "For 3 years I have been coming, and in 3 years I have never seen anyone else here." The woman lowered her gaze. Her hands trembled. "You put those lilies?" Mama Chinyere asked, pointing to the bouquet. The woman nodded without speaking. "Did you know my son?" The question fell between them like a stone in a dry well. The woman opened her mouth, but what came out was not a word. It was a sob. A deep, old sob that seemed to have been held back for years. The woman tried. "Yes, I knew him." Mama Chinyere looked her up and down. The expensive clothes, the handbag, the fine shoes covered in road dust. This woman did not belong in this world. Emeka was a bricklayer. He worked on construction sites across the country. How could a woman like this have known her son? Where did she know him from? But the woman did not answer, because at that moment, the child let go of his mother's leg and took 2 steps towards the grave. He bent down, placed his tiny hand on the painted letters of the name, Emeka, and said, with that small, clear voice that children have when they speak enormous truths, "My daddy is here, isn't he, Mummy?" The world stopped. Mama Chinyere dropped the bucket. The water spilled onto the dry earth and disappeared in seconds, swallowed by the scrubland. But Mama Chinyere did not look at the water. She looked at the child. She looked at those large, dark eyes, with a sparkle she knew, as she knew her own breath. They were Emeka's eyes, not similar, not alike. They were the same eyes that had looked at her for 28 years, from the cradle, from the table, from the compound door the day he left. "What did that child say?" Mama Chinyere whispered. Her voice was no longer harsh, it was a mere thread. The woman grabbed the child and lifted him into her arms. Her eyes filled with panic. "It's not what you think. We have to go." "What do you mean? It's not what I think." Mama Chinyere took a step forward. "That child just said my son is his father. Explain yourself, please, madam." I can't talk about this. It was a mistake to come." The woman began to walk quickly towards the exit of the burial ground, pressing the child against her chest. Mama Chinyere followed her, but legs of 62 years cannot catch up with those of 30. "Wait, don't take that child away." And then it happened. The child, frightened by the shouts, did something, a small, automatic gesture that he probably made 20 times a day without anyone giving it importance. He brought his right hand to his neck, closed it, as if grabbing something invisible, and pulled it downwards, as if untying a knot. The bandana gesture. Mama Chinyere remained rooted to the spot. Her legs felt weak. She had to grab the cross of another grave to keep from falling, because that gesture, that exact gesture, with the right hand, closing the fingers over the neck and pulling downwards, was not a common gesture. It was not something a 3-year-old child learns in school or on television. It was the gesture Emeka made every time he was nervous. From the age of 6, he would grab his bandana, pull it, loosen it, tie it again. A tick, a habit. Something so uniquely his that Mama Chinyere could recognize it with her eyes closed, just by the sound of the fabric sliding. No one could have taught that child that. No one. Because the only people who knew that gesture were dead or were standing there in the middle of a scrubland burial ground, watching a piece of Emeka walk away in the arms of a stranger. Mama Chinyere heard a car engine starting on the other side of the barbed wire fence. She saw the cloud of dust rise on the dirt road and stood there with the red bandana in her pocket and the wildflowers lying on the ground next to the empty bucket. The scrubland wind dried her tears before they reached her chin. But Mama Chinière was not crying from sadness. She was crying because for the first time in 3 years, her son was not completely dead. Mama Chinière didn't know how long she stood there in that burial ground. It could have been 5 minutes or an hour. The scrubland has no clock. It only has sun, wind, and silence. And all three remained there as if nothing had happened. She picked up the empty bucket, gathered the wildflowers from the ground, already wilted by the heat, and placed them on Emeka's grave, beside the white lilies the stranger had left. Her flowers looked poor next to those lilies, small, dry, but they were what the scrubland gave her, and Mama Chinière had never been ashamed of having little until today. Today, for the first time, she looked at her flowers and felt they were not enough, that she was not enough, that there was an entire piece of her son's life she didn't know, and that piece had just fled in a car with number plates she couldn't even read. She walked back to the compound with a heavy body and a throbbing head. The midday sun beat down on the back of her neck mercilessly. She reached her compound door and sat on the concrete step without going inside. The chickens approached her, expecting maize. Mama Chinière paid them no mind. That is how Baba Dele found her. Baba Dele was the kind of neighbor who appears when needed, without being called. 78 years old, a widower, his back bent from half a century of farm work, but with eyes that missed nothing. He was crossing the barbed wire fence that separated their two compounds with a can of goat milk in his hand, as he did every third day. "Chinière, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than a ghost, Baba Dele. I saw my son." Baba Dele placed the can on the ground and sat beside her without asking permission. Mama Chinière told him everything. The woman, the lilies, the child, the eyes, the gesture. Baba Dele listened without interrupting, which is the rarest and most valuable form of listening. When Mama Chinière finished, the old man scratched his chin and said what any sensible person would say. "What if you're mistaken? Eyes look alike, Chinière. Gestures are copied. Sometimes one sees what one wants to see." "I'm not mistaken." "How are you so sure?" "Because that gesture cannot be copied, Baba Dele. That gesture was born with Emeka. I saw it appear when he was 6 years old and I gave him his first bandana. No one taught him. It came out naturally, like a hiccup. And that child did it exactly the same way, with the same hand, with the same pull." Baba Dele was silent for a long while, then nodded. "I saw a strange car parked at the bend of the old road this morning," he said slowly. "Black, fancy, the kind that doesn't pass through here even by mistake. It had Lagos plates. Lagos, the bustling city, over 1,000 kilometers from this village where not even buses entered. Why didn't you tell me before?" Mama Chinière asked. "Because a fancy car parked isn't news, woman. Now it is." Mama Chinière got up from the step. She needed to think, and when Mama Chinière needed to think, she went to only one place. The village church was a mud brick room with a rusty iron cross on the roof. It had no pews, only plastic chairs someone had donated years ago. It had no stained glass windows or bell tower, but it had Pastor Gabriel, and that was more than enough. Pastor Gabriel was sitting in the back courtyard mending a football net that the catechism children had broken. He was 70 years old, his hands gnarled like someone who had lived more with his body than with his head, and a gaze that pierced through walls. He had baptized Emeka, given him his first communion, seen him go to the city, and led the service when his ashes were brought back. "Pastor, I need you to listen to me." Pastor Gabriel put down the net, took off his glasses, and looked at her. He didn't say, "Sit down." He didn't say, "Tell me." He just looked at her. That was enough. Mama Chinière told everything again, and when she finished, she waited for the verdict. Pastor Gabriel remained silent for a good while, then put his glasses back on as if he needed to see more clearly to say what he was going to say. "Chinière, you've been talking to a grave for 3 years. You tell him about your day, you bring him flowers, you ask forgiveness for things that don't need forgiveness. I never said anything because talking to the dead does no harm." He paused. "But now you have to decide if you're going to keep talking to the dead, or if you're going to go look for the living." Mama Chinière felt those words like a splash of cold water in her face. "I don't even know where to look, Pastor. You know it's Lagos. You know they have money. You know there's a child who looks like your son. That's more than you had this morning. And if I get there and they chase me away like a dog." Pastor Gabriel looked at her over his glasses. "Chinière, You birthed alone, you buried alone, and you've survived alone in a scrubland where even snakes struggle. And you're afraid of a door? Mama Chinyere didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, sitting at the kitchen table with weak coffee in her hands, she made her decision. She took the tin box where she kept her money from the chest of drawers. She counted the banknotes. There was just enough for a bus ticket to Lagos. A one-way ticket. God would see about the return. Before going to bed, she took the red bandana from her pocket and placed it on the empty pillow on the bed, the side where Emeka used to sleep as a child when he was afraid of storms. I will find him, my son, she whispered in the darkness. I will find that child. Outside, the scrubland was silent, but for the first time in 3 years, the silence did not feel empty. Mama Chinyere had never been on a passenger bus. She knew the vans that took people to the next village, the cargo lorries where she sometimes hitched a ride to the market, but a real bus, with numbered seats and air conditioning, that was something from another world. Baba Dele drove her to the Hermosillo terminal in his old pickup truck at 4 a.m. The dirt road from the village to the paved highway took almost 2 hours, and Mama Chinyere didn't want to miss the 7 a.m. departure. This will help you, Baba Dele said when he parked in front of the terminal. He handed her a folded paper. My friend Ibrahim, at the roundabout petrol station, told me something. He says the black car stopped to fill up with fuel the same day you saw it in the burial ground. The driver asked him for directions back to the Lagos highway. Ibrahim asked where they were coming from, and the man said from the Danjuma family's house that the madam had wanted to make a stop before returning. The Danjumas. Mama Chinya etched that surname into her mind as one etches a brand on cattle's hide. Danjuma of Lagos, she repeated. That's all there is, woman. But in Lagos, the wealthy Danjumas can't be that many. Ask around. You know how to ask. Mama Chinyere put the paper in her wrapper pocket next to the bandana. She embraced Baba Dele. The old man smelled of goat milk and firewood, the smell of her world, a smell that in a few hours would be far away. If I don't return in 3 days, feed my chickens, Mama Chinyere said. If you don't return in 3 days, I'll come for you in Lagos, even if I have to ride a donkey, Baba Dele replied. The bus left at 7 o'clock sharp. Mama Chinyere sat by the window with her market bag on her lap. Inside, she carried the bandana, a change of clothes, 4 akara balls wrapped in a cloth, a bottle of water, and Emeka's photo that she kept in her chest of drawers. It was an old photo from when he was 18, before he went to the city. He was smiling with that shy smile he had, the red bandana around his neck, his eyes shining with plans and future. The journey lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of scrubland that gradually transformed. First, the flat, dry land of the north, the baobabs like sentinels, the sky so vast it hurt to look at. Then the hills of the middle belt, green at the summits, bare at the slopes. Then the landscape changed. More cars, more houses, more advertisements, more noise. The scrubland filled with people and concrete until it disappeared completely. Mama Chinyere watched everything through the window without blinking. She had never seen so many lights together. She had never seen buildings more than 2 stories high. She had never seen so many people walking at the same time without greeting each other. In her village, passing someone without saying good morning was an offense. Here, no one looked at anyone. The bus arrived in Lagos at 9 p.m. The terminal was an enormous building that hummed like a beehive. Mama Chinyere got off with her market bag pressed against her chest and stood in the middle of people rushing in all directions. It smelled of diesel, fried food, and something else she couldn't identify. Later, she understood it was the smell of haste. Haste has a smell. It smells of sweat, with perfume on top. That night, she slept on a bench in the terminal, not for lack of options, but because she had no money for a hotel and wasn't going to spend what little she had left on a roof when there were free benches. She folded her bag as a pillow, covered herself with her wrapper, and closed her eyes. She didn't sleep, but her body rested while her mind worked. The next morning, Mama Chinyere did what she knew how to do, ask questions. She went to the newspaper stand at the terminal. She asked the man if he knew a wealthy Danjuma family in Lagos. The man laughed. There are thousands of Danjumas, Mama. Danjuma of what? Danjuma who has a daughter named, I don't know her name, young, pretty, dark hair, drives a big black car. You're describing half of Ikoyi, Mama. Ikoyi. Mama Chinyere memorized that name. She also took a commercial bus towards that area. The driver told her it was 40 minutes with no traffic. There was traffic. It took an hour and a half. But when the bus entered the streets of Ikoyi, Mama Chinyere understood why the woman from the burial ground dressed the way she did. The houses were not houses. They were fortresses. 3-meter walls with iron gates, gardens visible over the walls, green as if it rained every day, with trees pruned into shapes Mama Chinyere had never seen. Cars parked outside that cost more than her entire compound. Chickens, kitchen, and the memory of Emeka combined. Mama Chinyere got off the bus and started walking. She entered a pharmacy and asked about the Danjuma family. The employee looked at her strangely and said he didn't know any Danjumas around there. She walked 2 more blocks and asked in a stationery shop. The girl at the counter said there were some Danjumas in the Dolphin Estate area, but they were dentists, not builders. Mama Chinyere thanked her and kept walking. At the 3rd stop, a small shop with an old fan humming on the ceiling, she asked the woman at the counter if she knew the Danjumas. The Danjumas of the construction group? The woman asked without much interest. Mama Chinyere's heart sped up. Construction. Emeka was a bricklayer. He worked in construction. The threads connected. Yes, those ones. Their house is on Sierra Leone Street, going up towards the hill. It's the big house with a stone gate. You can't miss it. It's the biggest on the block. Mama Chinyere walked for 20 minutes uphill. The Lagos sun was different from the scrubland sun. It wasn't dry and clean. It was humid, heavy, sticky. Her blouse stuck to her back. Her sandals slipped on the smooth pavement, and then she saw it. The Danjuma house didn't have a barbed wire fence. It had a carved sandstone wall, sand-colored, taller than any wall Mama Chinyere had ever seen in her life. A black iron gate with the surname forged in gold letters. Behind the wall, the tops of trees emerged as if asking permission to leave. The sound of falling water could be heard, a fountain, a luxury as alien to Mama Chinyere as the sound of the ocean. To the right of the gate was a security booth with a guard inside. A young man in uniform, with dark glasses and a face of professional boredom. Mama Chinyere stood on the opposite pavement. She looked at the gate, looked at the booth, looked at her dusty sandals, her worn market bag, her dark blue dress that in the village was her best clothes and here looked like a rag. She remembered Pastor Gabriel's voice. "And you're afraid of a door?" Mama Chinyere crossed the street, stood in front of the security booth, and knocked on the glass with her knuckles. The guard looked at her up and down, without taking off his glasses. "What do you want, Mama?" "I'm looking for the Danjuma family. I need to speak with the lady of the house." The guard looked at her again, this time more slowly, the sandals, the market bag, the calloused hands, the wrapper. And Mama Chinyere saw how the guard decided in that second that she didn't deserve to be there. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "No appointment. No entry. Have a good day." And he closed the booth window. Mama Chinyere didn't move. She stood there under the Lagos sun, in front of a gate that was worth more than her entire life. But she didn't leave, because behind that wall, somewhere in that house, was a 3-year-old boy who brought his hand to his neck, as if looking for a bandana he had never had. And Mama Chinyere had not crossed the entire scrubland for a pane of glass to stop her. But what Mama Chinyere didn't know was that behind that gate there was not only a child with her son's eyes, there was a truth about Emeka's death that would change her life forever. Mama Chinyere waited for 3 hours. She sat on the opposite pavement under the stunted shade of a tree that the neighborhood gardeners kept pruned into a sphere. She didn't beg. She didn't talk to anyone. She just sat there with her market bag on her lap and her gaze fixed on the iron gate, like someone watching a maize farm waiting for rain. The guard looked at her occasionally from the booth. At first with annoyance, then with curiosity, and finally with that discomfort produced by people who don't leave when they should. At 11 a.m., the gate opened. The family didn't come out. A woman of about 40 came out in a domestic uniform, a white apron, and her hair tied in a net. She was carrying a trash bag towards the corner dumpster. Mama Chinyere stood up. "Madam, excuse me." The employee took a step back, startled. "I won't harm you," Mama Chinyere said with open hands, showing her calloused palms. "I just need a favor. I need someone from the house to listen to me. I've come pulled from very far." The employee looked at her with those eyes that instantly recognize people of their own class. She saw the sandals, the weathered hands, the clean but worn dress. She didn't see a threat. She saw someone like herself. "Who are you looking for?" The madam of the house or her daughter? The young lady who has a small child. Madam Edaobi does not receive visitors without Mrs. Danjuma's authorization, the employee said, lowering her voice. And Mrs. Danjuma does not receive anyone she doesn't know. Tell her I came from the scrubland, that it's about her daughter and about a young man named Emeka Eze, the employee frowned. The name didn't mean anything to her, but something in Mama Chinyere's face, something in the way she said that name, like someone uttering a prayer, convinced her. Wait for me here. I don't promise anything. The employee went through the gate. Mama Chinyere sat down again. 15 minutes passed. 20. The sun climbed, and the tree's shadow shrank. Mama Chinyere took the bottle of water from her bag and took a short sip. Less than half remained, and she didn't know when she could refill it. Then the gate opened again, but this time the employee didn't come out. Mrs. Danjuma did. Mama Chinyere knew who she was before she opened her mouth, not by the name, but by her walk. She walked as if the world owed her an apology for existing. Straight back, chin up, short, precise steps on her heels that clicked against the stone driveway like small hammer blows. Mrs. Danjuma was 64, but she looked 55. Her hair dyed a perfect brown, her skin cared for with creams that cost more than Mama Chinyere's monthly groceries. Her nails painted a discreet pink. She wore immaculate white trousers and a pearl-colored silk blouse. On her wrist, a watch gleamed in the sunlight. Everything about her said control. Everything about her said order. Behind Mrs. Danjuma came the guard, who had now removed his dark glasses and looked ready for anything. Mrs. Danjuma stopped 3 meters from Mama Chinyere. She did not cross the gate. She stayed on the inside, as if the pavement were another country. Are you the woman asking about my daughter? I am Chinyere Eze, Emeka Eze's mother. The name fell between them. Mrs. Danjuma did not blink, but Mama Chinyere saw the muscle in her jaw tense. 1 second, half a second, enough to know that the name was not unknown. I don't know who Emeka Eze is, Mrs. Danjuma said. Her voice was firm, rehearsed. And I don't know what they may have told you, but my daughter has no relationship with people from your background. Your background? Mama Chinyere heard those words and let them pass like the wind. They didn't hurt her. They informed her. Madam, I saw your daughter 3 days ago in the burial ground of my village. She was crying at my son's grave. She had a child with her. My daughter hasn't left Lagos in weeks. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you're confusing her with someone else. I am not confusing her. The car had Lagos plates, and the child is my grandson. Mrs. Danjuma cut her off, and for the first time her voice sharpened like a knife. My daughter's son, and her husband's. A respectable man, an entrepreneur, not a village bricklayer. Mama Chinyere felt the blow, not to her pride, but deeper, in that place where mothers keep the memory of their children. Emeka was not a village bricklayer. Emeka was a man who went to work so his mother could eat, who sent money every 15 days without fail, who tied the red bandana around his neck and built walls under a sun that melted asphalt so others could live in houses he could never afford. But Mama Chinyere said none of that, because dignity is not explained, it is demonstrated. I didn't come for money, madam, Mama Chinyere said. Her voice did not tremble. I came for my son's blood. Mrs. Danjuma pressed her lips until they turned white. Look, Mrs. Eze, I don't know who sent you or what you're looking for, but I'm going to tell you something clearly so you don't waste any more of your time or mine. My family has no relationship with you or your son, and if you approach this house or my daughter again, I will call the police. Is that clear? It's clear to me that you are afraid, Mama Chinyere said without raising her voice. And people who have nothing to hide are not afraid. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds. They were the longest 3 seconds of Mama Chinyere's life. Get her out of here, Mrs. Danjuma said to the guard without looking back. She turned around and began to walk towards the house. The guard approached Mama Chinyere. He didn't touch her, but he stood so close that she could smell his cheap deodorant under his uniform. You heard the madam. Please leave. Mama Chinyere got up from the pavement, picked up her market bag, adjusted her wrapper over her shoulders, and began to walk towards the corner with the same calm with which she had arrived. But after 10 steps, she stopped, because the gate had not yet closed completely. The iron leaves moved slowly, heavily, automatically, and through the gap that remained open, Mama Chinyere caught a glimpse of the garden. It was green, absurdly green for a city in Nigeria, with grass cut like a carpet, bushes with red flowers, and a stone fountain in the center where water fell with a sound that seemed from another planet. And there, by the fountain, was Kenechukwu. The child was playing with a toy car on the stone edge. He moved the wheels with his fingers, concentrated, oblivious to the world of adults and their wars. He wore a clean white t-shirt and denim shorts, his feet bare on the grass. And 3 meters from him, sitting on a garden bench with a glass in her hand and eyes swollen from someone who had been crying all morning, was Ada Obi. Ada Obi looked up at the exact moment. Mama Chinyer looked through the gap in the gate. Their eyes met. It wasn't a casual crossing. It was a collision. Ada Obi opened her mouth. No sound came out, but Mama Chinyere read 3 things on her face at the same time: fear, shame, and something else. Something that resembled relief, as if Ada Obi had been waiting for someone to come looking for her. The gate closed with a metallic thud that echoed in the empty street. Mama Chinyere stood staring at the black iron. On the other side, she heard Kenechukwu's voice muffled by the wall, talking to the toy car, with that absurd seriousness children have when they play alone. Mama Chinyere put her hand in her pocket and touched the bandana. The fabric was warm from the sun. She was not leaving Lagos, not yet, not without that child. But now she knew something she hadn't known before. She wasn't the only one searching. On the other side of the wall, someone also wanted to be found. The question was whether Ada Obi would have the courage to open the door her mother had just closed. Mama Chinyere spent that night on a park bench closest to the Danjuma house. No one chased her away because in Ikoyi, Lagos, the parks are so clean and empty at night that even the security guards don't bother checking them. She lay down, used her market bag as a pillow, and looked at the stars. They were the same stars visible from her compound, but here they seemed more distant, as if even the sky moved away from poor people. At 6 a.m., Mama Chinyere was already awake and sitting on the same pavement opposite the house. She didn't knock on the booth. She didn't insist with the guard. She just sat and waited with the patience the scrubland teaches. At 8 a.m., the gate opened. A silver car driven by a chauffeur came out. In the back seat, Mama Chinyere caught sight of Mrs. Danjuma checking her phone. The car passed her without stopping. Mrs. Danjuma didn't look at her, or pretended not to. It didn't matter. At 9 a.m., the same employee from the previous day came out to sweep the pavement in front of the gate. Seeing Mama Chinyere, she stopped. "Mama, did you sleep here? I have slept in worse places." The employee looked inside the booth. The guard was distracted with his phone. Madam Ada Obi goes to the San Agustin market every Tuesday. She takes the child. She leaves at 10 a.m. The employee lowered her voice until it was barely a whisper. "Today is Tuesday." Mama Chinyere nodded once. She didn't say thank you with words. She looked into the employee's eyes, and the employee understood. The San Agustin market was unlike any market Mama Chinyere knew. There were no canvas stalls, no shouting vendors, no flies on the fruit. It was an enclosed, air-conditioned building where people bought imported cheeses and bread that cost what Mama Chinyere spent on beans for a week. But it was a public place, and in public places there are no gates or guards to tell you that you don't belong. Mama Chinyere entered and sat on a bench in front of the juice fountain where she could see the main entrance. At 10:15 a.m., Ada Obi entered. She came alone with Kenechukwu. The child walked beside her, holding her hand, looking at everything with that voracious curiosity of a 3-year-old. Ada Obi wore dark glasses, her hair tied back, and simple clothes for what Mama Chinyere had already seen in that neighborhood. She seemed to want to go unnoticed. Mama Chinyere stood up. Ada Obi saw her from 5 meters away. She stopped abruptly. The color drained from her face. She looked sideways, searching for someone, perhaps hoping to see Mrs. Danjuma or Segun or the guard. There was no one, only Mama Chinyere, standing by a bench with her market bag and worn sandals. "Please," Ada Obi said. Her voice broke from the first syllable. "Please, don't do this here. I didn't come to cause a scene, my daughter," Mama Chinyere said. And that word, my daughter, escaped her soul without permission. "I just want to talk for 5 minutes. If, after 5 minutes, you want to send me away, I will go and not return." Ada Obi looked at Kenechukwu. The child watched Mama Chinyere with curiosity, without fear. 3-year-old children have no radar for social danger. They only see faces. And Mama Chinyere's face was a good face, wrinkled by the sun, weathered by the scrubland, but good. 5 minutes, Adaobi said. They sat at a table in the back of the food court. Kenechukwu entertained himself with a serviette that Mama Chinyer folded into the shape of a chicken, a trick she had taught Emeka when he was the same age. The child took it, turned it, laughed. Adaobi took off her dark glasses. Her eyes were red, not from today, but from years. I know who you are, Adaobi said before Mama Chinyer could speak. You are Emeka's mother, and you are the woman who was crying at his grave. Adaobi nodded. Her chin trembled. That child is Emeka's son. The question hung over the table like smoke. Adaobi closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was no longer holding anything back. Yes. A single word, 3 letters. And Mama Chinyere's world split in two and reassembled at the same time. Tell me, Mama Chinyere said. Tell me everything. And Adaobi told her. She said she met Emeka at a construction site. Her family's company was building on the outskirts of Lagos. She was there to supervise some finishes because she was studying architecture. Emeka was building a wall under the July sun with the red bandana tied around his neck and his hands full of cement mixture. They didn't speak that day, nor the next, nor the next. But on the 4th day, Adaobi tripped over a cable, and Emeka grabbed her arm before she fell. Careful, engineer, he said with a shy smile. And Adaobi knew at that instant that she was lost. They met in secret for 8 months in cafes far from the city center, in parks where no one from her family went, in the small apartment Emeka rented with 3 other workers and that he emptied for her on Sundays. Emeka cooked her beans and fried plantain, and Adaobi said she had never eaten anything more delicious in her life. Emeka talked about you, Adaobi said, looking at Mama Chinyer with shining eyes. He told me you were the strongest woman in the world, that you lived alone in a compound in the middle of nowhere and never complained. He told me he wanted to take me to meet you, but that first he had to save money to fix the house because he was ashamed of how you lived. Mama Chinyere swallowed. Emeka had never told her anything, not a word, not a hint. Why didn't you look for me when he died? Mama Chinyere asked. Adaobi lowered her gaze. Because Segun forbade me. And there appeared the name Mama Chinyer didn't yet know, but which would change her life. Adaobi told how Segun discovered their relationship. An employee at the construction site saw them together and told Segun. Segun arrived at Emeka's apartment one night. Adaobi heard the shouting from the kitchen where she had hidden. Segun told Emeka that if he didn't disappear from his sister's life, he would destroy his life, that he would have him deported, that he would fabricate a record against him, that he would make sure he found no work in Nigeria or anywhere else. Emeka wasn't scared. He told Segun that he loved Adaobi and that he would fight for her. A week later, Emeka was transferred to a construction site in Port Harcourt, a building in a high-risk area with cheap materials and safety measures that existed only on paper. Segun signed the transfer order. He knew the conditions, he knew the risks, and he sent Emeka anyway. The scaffolding collapsed on a Tuesday morning, Adaobi said. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she did nothing to stop them. Emeka and 2 other workers. The other 2 survived with injuries. Emeka did not. Mama Chinyer felt the table move. It wasn't moving. It was she who was trembling. When I found out, I was already 2 months pregnant, Adaobi continued. Segun took me to a private hospital where no one asked questions. He told me that if I said a word about Emeka, he would destroy what little dignity was left of my child's name. He told me the baby would be born without a father and without a surname. He told me the only way to give him a future was to marry Chief Obiora, a business partner of the company, a business marriage. Chief Obiora knew the truth, but the Danjuma name suited him, so he accepted. And your mother? Mama Chinyere asked. Mrs. Danjuma, does she know? Adaobi shook her head. My mother believes Kenechukwu is Chief Obiora's son. Segun told her that I had an affair with a construction worker, but that he resolved it before it escalated. My mother believes Segun saved me from making a mistake. She doesn't know that this mistake has a name, has dark eyes, and is 3 years old. Mama Chinyer looked at Kenechukwu. The child was still playing with the serviette chicken, oblivious to everything, oblivious that his entire life was a lie built by a man who believed that protecting meant controlling. Adaobi, Mama Chinyer said. Her voice was a thread but firm. My son's death was an accident. Adaobi looked her straight in the eyes. The site was classified as high risk. Segun knew it. There were reports. Emeka had no experience at height. He had never worked on scaffolding. Segun sent him there knowing all that. It was intentional. I don't know if he wanted him to die, but I know he didn't care if he died. Mama Chinyere closed her eyes, clenched her fists on the table until her knuckles turned white. She felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years of silent mourning. It wasn't sadness. It was fury, a black, hot fury that rose from her stomach to her throat like bile. Her son did not die by bad luck. He did not die because God willed it. He died because a rich man decided his life was worth less than a family name. When she opened her eyes, Adaobi had something in her hands. She had taken it from her handbag. It was a cloth handkerchief folded carefully. She placed it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside was a red bandana. It wasn't Mama Chinyere's. It was another, darker, more worn, with stains that time hadn't been able to erase, stains of cement, of sweat, of construction site dirt. He was wearing it the day he died, Adaobi whispered. They gave it to me with his things at the hospital. I kept it. It's the only thing I have of him. Mama Chinyere looked at the bandana on the table, reached into her pocket, and took out hers. She placed it beside Adaobi's, 2 red bandanas, 2 pieces of the same fabric, of the same life, separated by death, and reunited on a wealthy market table by 2 women who loved the same man. Mama Chinyere took Emeka's bandana with one hand, and with the other, she took Adaobi's hand. My daughter, Mama Chinyere said, and this time the word didn't escape. She said it on purpose. You are no longer alone. Adaobi let out a sob that came from so deep within that Kenechukwu looked up, his eyes wide, at his mother. Mummy, why are you crying? Adaobi wiped her tears and smiled at the child. Because I'm happy, my love. Kenechukwu looked at her, confused. Then he looked at Mama Chinyere and extended the serviette chicken to her. Take it, Mama, so you won't be sad too. Mama Chinyere took the paper chicken. Her hand trembled. She brought it to her chest as if it were gold, and at that moment, at a market table amidst the smell of expensive bread and the noise of people buying cheeses she would never taste, Mama Chinyere met her grandson. Adaobi took 2 days to gather her courage. 2 days in which Mama Chinyere slept on the park bench, ate cold akara with salt, and waited. She didn't pressure, didn't send messages. She knew that what Adaobi was about to do was harder than anything she herself had done in 62 years of life, because Mama Chinyere had faced the scrubland, poverty, solitude, but Adaobi was going to face her own mother, and there is no scrubland harder than that. On Thursday at 9 a.m., Mama Chinyere received a call. Adaobi had bought a disposable phone and given her the number at the market. Come to the house. My mother is here. Segun is not. He went to a construction site in Port Harcourt. It's now or never. Mama Chinyere washed her face at the park fountain. She smoothed her blue dress with her hands, braided her hair, and walked towards the black iron gate. This time she didn't sit on the pavement. She knocked on the booth. The guard looked at her with annoyance. Madam, I told you already. Madam Adaobi is expecting me. Call her if you wish. The guard hesitated. He called the intercom. 30 seconds later, the gate opened. Mama Chinyere crossed the threshold and stepped onto the green grass of the Danjuma house. She felt the grass under her sandals, fresh, wet from the sprinklers. In her compound, grass was a rainy season miracle that lasted 3 weeks. Here, it was a permanent luxury. Adaobi was waiting for her at the main door. She was pale, but composed. She held Kenechukwu's hand. The child saw Mama Chinyere and smiled. The chicken lady, Kenechukwu said. Mama Chinyere felt her chest fill with something warm. She stroked the child's head. Hello, my love. Come in, Adaobi said. My mother is in the living room. The Danjuma's living room was larger than Mama Chinyere's entire compound. Marble floors, cream-colored leather sofas, paintings on the walls that looked like museum pieces. Everything smelled clean, of fresh flowers, of money. And in the middle of it all, sitting with a straight back and an untouched cup of coffee in her hand, was Mrs. Danjuma. Mrs. Danjuma saw Mama Chinyere enter, and her expression hardened like setting cement. Adaobi, Mrs. Danjuma said without rising, can you explain what this woman is doing in my house? Mama, I need you to listen to something, and I need you to listen until the end before speaking. I have nothing to listen to. Kenechukwu is Emeka's son. Adaobi said it abruptly, without preamble, without softening, without preparing the ground. She released it like dropping a stone to the bottom of a well, and the silence that followed was the sound of that stone falling. Mrs. Danjuma didn't move. The coffee trembled in her hand, but she didn't move. Her face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, disbelief, and fury. What did you say? Kenechukwu is not Chief Obiora's son. He is Emeka Eze's son, the construction worker, the man Sigun forced me to leave, the man who died. Mrs. Danjuma put the coffee cup on the table with a dry thud. She stood up. You have lost your mind, Mrs. Danjuma said. Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with rage. This woman brainwashed you. She sought you out, found you vulnerable, and filled your head with lies to get money. It's the oldest trick in the book, Adaobi. I can't believe you're so naive. No one brainwashed me, Mama. Then what? Are you going to tell me you lied to me for 3 years? 3 years looking me in the face every Sunday at family lunch with my grandson in your arms, knowing he was the son of a stranger. He wasn't a stranger. He was the man I loved. Mrs. Danjuma turned towards Mama Chinyere. Her eyes were 2 knives. You came to destroy my family. I don't know what you told my daughter. I don't know what evidence you invented. But I swear that if you don't leave this house right now, I will make you regret ever crossing the scrubland. Mama Chinyere didn't back down, didn't raise her voice, didn't lower her gaze. She stood in the middle of that marble living room with her worn sandals and blue dress and said what she had come to say. Mrs. Danjuma, I didn't come to destroy anything. I came to find what remains of my son, and what remains of my son is that child. That child is my grandson. He is yours too. The phrase hung between the 2 matriarchs like an invisible border. 2 women of the same age, of the same pain, from opposite worlds, claiming the same child. Mrs. Danjuma took out her phone. I'm calling Segun. He will clarify this madness. Call him, Adaobi said. Call him and ask him why he transferred Emeka to the Port Harcourt site a week after discovering I was with him. Ask him why that site was classified as high risk. Ask him why Emeka, who had never worked at height, ended up on a 15-meter scaffolding without a safety harness. Mrs. Danjuma stopped with the phone halfway to her ear. She looked at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. What are you saying, Adaobi? I'm saying Segun knew. He knew about Emeka and me. He knew about the pregnancy and decided to solve the problem by sending him to a place where the probabilities of something going wrong were extremely high. Your brother would never do something like that. My brother did that and more, Mama. He forced me to marry Chief Obiora to cover up the shame. He made me sign papers saying Kenechukwu is Chief Obiora's son. He threatened to take the child away from me if I spoke. I've been living in a prison with a garden and air conditioning for 3 years. Mrs. Danjuma sank into the sofa. The phone lay dead in her hand. Her face was no longer furious. It was that of someone whose world was shifting beneath their feet. It's not true, Mrs. Danjuma murmured. But she no longer sounded sure. She sounded like someone repeating something so as not to have to believe something else. Look at the child, madam, Mama Chinyere said. Mrs. Danjuma turned her head. Kenechukwu was sitting on the marble floor next to the coffee table, playing with a pencil. The adult shouting had made him nervous, and when Kenechukwu got nervous, he did what he always did. He brought his right hand to his neck, closed his fingers as if grabbing something, and pulled downwards the bandana gesture. Mrs. Danjuma saw it. She didn't understand what it was, but she saw it. A strange, repetitive gesture that didn't fit with anything. Mama Chinyere took out the photo of Emeka at 18 from her pocket. She placed it on the table in front of Mrs. Danjuma. Emeka smiled with the red bandana around his neck, his right hand gripping the fabric, pulling it downwards. The same gesture, the same hand, the same tilt of the head. Mrs. Danjuma looked at the photo, looked at the child, looked at the photo, looked at the child. That gesture is not taught, madam, Mama Chinyere said. It is born, just like the eyes, just like the blood. Mrs. Danjuma didn't answer, but Mama Chinyere saw something she didn't expect to see. She saw Mrs. Danjuma's eyes fill with water. Not with rage, but with something worse, doubt. And doubt in a woman who has always had certainties is the beginning of collapse. At that moment, the main door burst open. Segun entered the living room, his suit wrinkled and his tie loose, as if he had driven 3 hours non-stop from Port Harcourt. Someone had alerted him. Perhaps the guard, perhaps the employee. It didn't matter. He was there. What's going on here? Segun said, looking at Adaobi, then at Mama Chinyere, then at his mother. His voice was controlled, but his eyes showed alarm. Segun, Mrs. Danjuma said. Her voice was no longer that of a matriarch. It was that of a mother searching for the truth. Did you send a worker named Emeka Eze to the Port Harcourt site? Segun's silence lasted a second too long. Just 1 second, but it was enough. I don't know what you're talking about, Mama. Yes, you do, Adaobi said. Adaobi, this is ridiculous. Who is this woman? What did you tell Mama? I told her the truth, Segun. Everything. Segun looked at Mama Chinyere with contempt. He measured her from head to toe, just like the guard, just like Mrs. Danjuma on the first day. But unlike them, in Segun's gaze there was something more. There was fear. Mama, Segun said, turning to Mrs. Danjuma, these people want money. It's a stage story. The village woman is looking for a pension and used Adaobi because she knows she is weak. You can't believe her. Segun's voice cut her like a knife. Look me in the eyes and tell me you didn't know Adaobi was pregnant with that young man when you transferred him. That's a lie, Segun said without blinking. I knew nothing about any pregnancy. Transfers are decided by the operations department, not by me. Your signature is on the order, Segun, Adaobi said. I saw it, dated September 7th, 9 days after you found out. Segun loosened his tie, a quick, nervous gesture. The living room was cold from the air conditioning, but Segun's forehead gleamed with sweat. Mama, this is absurd. They are setting me up, both of them. This woman comes from a lost village and suddenly knows dates. She has proof. Don't you realize it's a setup? Then tell me you didn't do it, Mrs. Danjuma said. Her voice was no longer a knife. It was a whisper. And the whisper was worse. Tell me you didn't know, and I'll believe you. But look me in the eyes when you say it. Segun looked at his mother, looked her straight in the eyes as she asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and what came out was not what he wanted to say. Mama, I did what I had to do to protect this family. That phrase was the confession Segun didn't want to give, because he didn't say, it's not true. He didn't say, they are lying. He said, I did what I had to do. And everyone in that room, even he, knew he had just betrayed himself. Mrs. Danjuma kept looking at her son, her eldest son, the one who had carried the company since he was 25, the one she believed was the family's pillar. And for the first time in her life, Mrs. Danjuma didn't know what to say. She turned slowly towards Mama Chinyere, looked at her. There was no longer contempt, no longer fury. There was something Mama Chinyere recognized because she had felt it herself many times. It was the pain of a mother who discovers that her son is not who she thought he was. What happened in the following days was not an earthquake. It was something worse. It was the silence after the earthquake, when the cracks slowly open, and each one hurts more than the last. Mrs. Danjuma didn't speak to anyone that night. She didn't eat dinner, didn't leave her room. She sat in front of the desk where her late husband used to sign the construction company contracts and opened the company files. Segun kept in the cloud. Mrs. Danjuma was not a tech-savvy woman, but she could read a legal document like someone reads a cooking recipe. She had spent decades signing balance sheets alongside her husband. It didn't take long for her to find it. The transfer order for Emeka Eze to the Port Harcourt site bore Segun's signature. The date was September 7th, exactly 9 days after an employee reported seeing Adaobi with a worker from the Lagos site. Alongside the order, there was a technical report that classified the Port Harcourt construction as a Level 3 risk zone. In that same report, with a red stamp no one could ignore, it read that the scaffolding did not comply with federal regulations and that 2 previous incidents had been reported in the same structure. Segun had read that report. He knew it because in the margin, in his tight, nervous handwriting, there was a note that said, "Proceed, no budget to replace structure, contractor's responsibility." Mrs. Danjuma closed the laptop, took off her glasses, and cried. She didn't cry for Mama Chinyere, nor for Emeka, nor even for Adaobi. She cried for herself, because she realized that the son she trusted most, to whom she had entrusted the company and the family's future, had lied to her for 3 years, looking her in the eyes every Sunday at family lunch, and she cried because she knew that she had helped, not out of malice, but out of blindness. She had looked the other way when Segun told her that Adaobi's affair was resolved. She had applauded the marriage to Chief Obiora without asking her daughter if she was happy. She had let the Danjuma name matter more than the truth. The next day, Mrs. Danjuma called Segun to her office. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. No one else was present. When Segun came out, his face was gray and his hands were trembling. That same afternoon, the family lawyers received instructions to restructure the company's management. Segun was removed from the administrative board. There were no shouts, no police, no public scene. It was a silent execution, carried out with the same coldness with which Segun had signed that transfer order. The justice of the rich makes no noise, but it hurts just the same. Adaobi spoke with Chief Obiora that same week. The divorce was not difficult because the marriage had never been real. Chief Obiora signed the papers without a fight. Deep down, he too was tired of pretending. He took his name and his businesses and left Adaobi with the only thing that mattered, Kenechukwu. But the moment that changed everything was not Segun's downfall or Adaobi's divorce. It was something smaller, quieter, more important. It was Mrs. Danjuma knocking on the door of a cheap hotel in central Lagos at 7 a.m. on a Friday, but she almost didn't make it. Mrs. Danjuma got into the car that morning with the hotel address in her hand. The chauffeur started the engine. 3 blocks later, Mrs. Danjuma told him to stop. She sat in the back seat, looking out the window without seeing anything for 5 minutes. She was about to say, "Take me home." She was about to convince herself that she could solve this another way, with lawyers, with distance, with money, that she didn't need to go to that cheap hotel to sit across from the woman who had told her the truth to her face while she spat contempt. But then she remembered Kenechukwu's eyes, that neck gesture that she now couldn't stop seeing every time the child got nervous, and she told the chauffeur to continue. Mama Chinyere opened the door in her nightdress. She had spent 3 nights in that room that smelled of chlorine and dampness, paid for with the money Adaobi had secretly given her, which Mama Chinyere accepted only because she had no other choice. Seeing Mrs. Danjuma in the hallway, with perfect makeup but eyes sunken from someone who hadn't slept for days, Mama Chinyere didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She stepped aside and let her in. Mrs. Danjuma entered, looked at the narrow bed, the yellowish walls, the market bag on the plastic chair. She looked at the sandals by the door, looked at the red bandana folded on the pillow, and sat on the edge of the bed, as if her legs could no longer support her. "I came to ask you for something," Mrs. Danjuma said. Tell me about Emeka." Mama Chinyere looked at her. She looked for a trap. She looked for condescension. She looked for pity. She found none of that. She only found a 64-year-old woman who had lost her certainties and needed to hold on to something real. Mama Chinyere sat in the plastic chair opposite her and spoke. She told her about Emeka as a child, running barefoot among the cassava plants in the compound. She told her about the red bandana she gave him at age 6, a remnant of the one his grandfather used, and how Emeka never took it off. She told her about the nights Emeka studied by candlelight because there was no electricity, and how he learned to read with a recipe book that was the only book in the house. She told her about the day Emeka told her he was going to the city, and how she didn't cry in front of him, because mothers of the scrubland don't cry in front of their children. They cry later, when the bus has already left and the dust settles. She told her that Emeka sent money every 15 days without fail until he stopped sending, and that she thought he had forgotten her, that the city had consumed him, that he was no longer her son. She didn't know he was dead until a month later, when a man from the consulate arrived with a cardboard box containing his belongings. "In that box came the bandana I have here," Mama Chinyere said, touching the fabric on the pillow. "But Adaobi had another one, the one he wore the day he died. Both are the same because I cut them from the same fabric, one for me and one for him." Mrs. Danjuma listened without interrupting. Tears ran down her cheeks, ruining the makeup she had put on so carefully that morning. "The man you despised," Mama Chinyere said without resentment, only with naked truth. "He is the man who made your daughter happy, the only one, and he is the father of your grandson." Mrs. Danjuma wiped her tears with a silk handkerchief, then looked at Mama Chinyere and said something that took Mama Chinyere a moment to process. "You raised a good man, Chinyere, and I failed to see it." It was the first time Mrs. Danjuma had called her by her first name. Mama Chinyere felt something loosen in her chest, a knot that had been tight for days. It wasn't forgiveness yet. Forgiveness is slow and has its own timing, but it was the beginning. "And you cared for my grandson without knowing he was mine," Mama Chinyere replied. "That also counts." The two women looked at each other in that cheap hotel room with sunlight streaming through a dirty window. They didn't embrace. It wasn't time for that. But something changed in the air between them. The wall was no longer there. Rubble remained. Yes, pain remained, shame, lost years, but the wall was gone. I want Kenechukwu to know you, Mrs. Danjuma said, as what you are, as his grandmother. We are both his grandmothers, Mama Chinyere said. Mrs. Danjuma nodded. For the first time, she nodded without effort. Both. A month later, the dirt road to the village burial ground filled with dust for the second time that 15th day. But this time, it wasn't Mama Chinyere alone with her bucket and wildflowers. There were 4 of them. Mama Chinyere walked ahead with the firm step of someone who knew every stone on the path. Beside her, Ada Obi carried a bouquet of white daisies bought in the Hermosillo market. Behind, Mrs. Danjuma walked slowly with the wrong shoes for the dirt road, her heel sinking into the loose earth with each step, but without complaining. And between the 3, one hand holding his mother's, and the other holding Mama Chinyere's, Kenechukwu walked, looking at everything with wide eyes. "Grandma, do lizards live here?" the child asked, pointing to a crack in the earth. "Everything lives here, my love," Mama Chinyere said. "Lizards, scorpions, snakes, and people too, hard as it is to believe." Mrs. Danjuma looked at the burial ground upon arrival, the wooden and concrete crosses, the barbed wire, the dusty Iroko tree. She looked at Emeka's grave with the hand-painted letters. She said nothing, but Mama Chinyere saw her press her lips together and swallow something she didn't want to release in front of anyone. Adaobi knelt in front of the headstone and placed the daisies. Kenechukwu let go of his grandmother's hands, approached the cross, and placed something on the earth. It was the serviette chicken Mama Chinyere had made for him at the San Agustin market. He had kept it all that month, crumpled and torn at the edges, but he had kept it. "It's for my daddy," Kenechukwu said, "so he won't be alone." Mama Chinyere took the 2 bandanas from her pocket, hers and Emeka's, and tied them together to the concrete cross. The red fabric moved with the scrubland wind, like a small flag, like a heart beating where nothing should beat anymore. Mrs. Danjuma approached Mama Chinyere. They stood together in front of the grave, shoulder to shoulder, the woman from the compound and the woman from the mansion, sandals and heels, sinking into the same earth. "It's a beautiful place, Mrs. Danjuma said, looking at the enormous scrubland sky. Mama Chinyere glanced at her. She knew Mrs. Danjuma wasn't referring to the burial ground. She was referring to the world Emeka came from, the world she had despised without knowing, the world that had raised the man her daughter loved. "Yes," Mama Chinyere said, "it's a beautiful place." Kenechukwu sat on the earth between the 2 grandmothers, playing with stones from the ground, humming a song no one had taught him. And the 4 people who remained of Emeka Eze in this world stayed there in silence, letting the scrubland wind say what words no longer could. Sometimes one thinks that when a child dies, everything dies, that the world ends, and what remains is just routine, just walking aimlessly until it's one's own turn. Mama Chinyere thought so for 3 years. 3 years talking to a grave, 3 years believing that Emeka had taken everything with him. But Emeka didn't take everything. He left the most important thing. He left a pair of dark eyes on a child's face who brings his hand to his neck when he gets nervous. He left a love that survived fear, lies, and distance. And he left a lesson that his own mother was slow to learn, that blood understands nothing of surnames, nor of money, nor of sandstone walls. Blood finds a way. It always finds a way. If you know what it's like to lose someone and find them where you least expected, tell us your story in the comments. Subscribe for more stories like this and share with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes all it takes for life to change is a 15th day, a burial ground in the scrubland, and a child who tells the truth without knowing he is telling it.